Have you ever feared that God might ask too much of you? When we first read the story of Abraham and Isaac as recorded in Genesis 22, it's only natural to think that God was asking too much of Abraham. But by the end of the chapter, one thing is clear. We serve a trustworthy God who always makes good on his promises. In order to recognize the weight of what's really being asked of Abraham in Genesis 22, we have to remember that Abraham and Sarah had been waiting for God to make good on his promise for 25 years before their son Isaac was born. Along the way, they tried to accelerate the promises of God by taking matters into their own hands. Sound familiar? Which resulted in Hagar, Sarah's servant, giving birth to Abraham's son, Ishmael. Yet in Genesis 17, as God reaffirms the covenant promise he made with Abraham in Genesis 12 and 15, he clarifies that Sarah herself will give birth to a son, and it will be through him that the covenant blessing will prevail. While God assures Abraham that Ishmael will still be taken care of, he promises that Sarah will give birth to a son named Isaac, which means laughter. The thought of Isaac's very existence seemed laughable to both Abraham and Sarah, and justifiably so. Abraham was over 99 when God told him, and Sarah was probably 89. To be pregnant with Isaac by this time next year in Genesis 17:21? But we serve a trustworthy God who always makes good on his promises. Before we turn our attention to Genesis 22 again, it's important to remind ourselves of the joy and wonder surrounding Isaac's birth, because it was truly a miracle. That's one reason why what God asks Abraham to do in Genesis 22 seems unfathomable. While the first verse reveals to us, the reader, that God is testing Abraham, Abraham didn't know. He had to completely trust God's instructions. Take your son, your only son whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him as a burnt offering on the mountain I will show you. If we did not know God's perfect character, this indeed would seem like a cruel and vicious command, especially since we know that God condemns child sacrifice on multiple occasions throughout his word to us. Yet God proved his merciful character over and over again to Abraham, and we can be assured that he won't stop here. Abraham wasted no time obeying God and set out with Isaac the very next day, rather than questioning God or asking for clarification like I would have done. Father and son went in simple and pure-hearted obedience. When Isaac asked his father, "Where's the lamb for the burnt offering?" in unwavering faith and with abounding love, Abraham told Isaac in verse 8, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." When Abraham and Isaac arrived at the top of Mount Moriah, Abraham prepared an altar for the sacrifice, something that Isaac had likely seen him do countless times before. And then he bound his son and set him on top of the wood pile that was meant for animal, not human. Right as Abraham took the knife to sacrifice his only son, God intervened, satisfied that Abraham valued him over everything and everyone that God had given him. God in his great mercy did indeed provide a ram to be sacrificed in place of Isaac. In response to God's provision, Abraham named the mountain, "The Lord will provide," Mount Moriah, where the Temple Mount now resides. Sometimes it may seem as God is asking something to us that seems unfair and out of his character, but we must rely on this, that any test he puts on our path is far more for us than for him. God is our creator and sustainer of the universe. He never changes, but as humans we're prone to wander and wrestle between mistrust and trust, just as Abraham and Sarah did. God asking Abraham to sacrifice Isaac wasn't about Isaac the sacrifice, but it was about Abraham and what he was willing to surrender to God, which was everything. So if you ever feel like God is asking too much of you, stand firm in your unwavering commitment to him. Walk in obedience just as Abraham did, and watch as he miraculously provides. For as David writes in Psalm 145, "The Lord is trustworthy in his promises, and he is faithful in all he does."